So welcome to my channel. That's what we call the good life. Now today I'm going to be talking about tomato blight. First of all, identification, prevention and also treatment. If you don't know what tomato blight is, it's something that affects tomato and potato crops, and it is really quite bad if you get it. The tomato fruits actually rot, and it can be the end of your plants if you get it. Now obviously I'm here to try and help you not get it and to get fantastic tomatoes. It's a pathogen, which is basically a fungal organism which is spread through the wind. There's much skepticism. I've read a lot about it. Even on the RHS site I found that it wasn't completely conclusive, but they think it's mainly comes from, it overwinters from potato tubers from the commercial industry, and then it's airborne, and then it spreads all depending on the weather conditions. So one of the first things to bear in mind that generally blight only occurs when you've got certain weather conditions, and generally speaking those are wet, hot and humid, when things like funguses are more likely to breed. So when it's not hot and humid and wet, then it's normally okay and we don't get such bad blight. Something worth registering with, and it's free, is Blight Spy. You can register on there. Commercial growers register on there, and also anyone can register on there as well to keep an eye of whether there is blight in your area and whether you need to be extra vigilant. So that's something you can do. Blight typically affects the leaves first on the plants, and then spreads to the fruit. So if we talk about prevention first, because I think that's quite important, the best thing to do is not have it in the first place. Now something that I always do is I always try and plant my tomatoes in the sunniest spot I possibly can, because again then it's more likely to be drier, so less chance to get humid. You need air around your plants is what you're trying to do to stop things like funguses building up. So I never plant my tomatoes in squares, I always plant them in rows so they're not all packed in. The one time I had really bad blight was when I'd packed them all in together and I had rows of them and I had no air going around them. And after I got that, I really looked into ways that I could stop or minimise the chances of getting it. So planting them in rows in a sunny spot is definitely one of the best things you can possibly do. The other thing is make sure you take side shoots out, because again it stops them, it gets more air going around them. You should take side shoots out of them anyway, so that you get good tomatoes, because you're not growing leaves, you're growing tomatoes. And although you need leaves for photosynthesis, you only need so many, you don't need a whole bushful. You're not going to get better tomatoes because you've got more leaves. So when you've got, I've removed an awful lot of my side shoots, but a side shoot is when you've got the main stem growing up through the middle, and then you've got the leaves coming out, and it's the shoots that grow in between there. So I've got one there, so I've got a stem going up, I've got a leaf going out, and I've got a little side shoot growing there. So removing all those would really help, because again you're getting air around them. Something else that I do, which also really helps, is once each truss of fruit is completed, like that one there, I remove the leaves below, which again creates more airflow. So I can take that one off. I've actually got a sneaky big side shoot there which I'm going to remove, so even people like me, they can sneak up behind you. So they're not completed, the trusses on those, but if I look at this one as an example, I have a completed truss of fruit there, so I can remove all the leaves below it. So just get your secateurs out and just trim them off. So I'll take that off. So what you're trying to do is get as much air around them as you possibly can. The disease is spread onto the leaves first, so again by removing the leaves you're removing the thing that it actually goes onto, and is what actually causes the problem, because the blight doesn't go to your tomatoes, it goes to your leaves, and then it goes into the plant, and then it affects your tomatoes afterwards. So by removing the leaves, again you are doing yourself a favour and stopping the spread of the disease, and you're creating better airflow, and it's generally better all round. So what will happen by the end of the season, because obviously you'll have all your tomatoes formed, you will eventually have virtually a bare stem just with the tomatoes on there, and it will look a little bit bare. But if you go to a commercial growing house, or you go to some of these like nice houses or gardens, if you go into their greenhouses, they will have long tall stems of the tomatoes, and they will be doing exactly the same. So also blight is more likely outside, but you can still get it in a greenhouse. So you still do need to take the same precautions outside and inside as well. So the other thing is obviously feed your plants. You know, the better they're fed, the better they're looked after, the more resilient they're going to be if anything is floating around. Like human beings, if we look after ourselves better, we fare better than if we didn't. So I always give them a really good feed every week or every couple of weeks with a good tomato feed. I use a few other things like Epsom salts and things like that, but as long as you're feeding them something and you're looking after them and the plants are nice and healthy, that's really, really important. So moving on to identification. Now this is really, really important because an awful lot of people think they've got blight, they panic, and they haven't got blight. I see so many pictures online of people not knowing what blight looks like and misidentifying it and panicking, when actually it's nothing to concern yourself about, and it's something completely different. It's really handy to have a decent book for identification, or look at other resources. This book that I've got, the Vegetable and Herb Expert, I've had it for donkey's years. It's a really good old-fashioned all-rounder. I will put a link up on the screen and one in the description if you wish to buy one. We do have an allotment shop. I have to tell you that I do make a little bit of money out of it if you did buy one, but this book is probably my biggest go-to book because in here I do have a section on identification, which is really, really useful. And identification for all different fruits and vegetables, not just tomatoes, for looking for disease and to making sure I identify it correctly. So blight, we'll start on the leaves first, and it's brown patches. Now generally speaking, there's a picture on here of, it says potato blight, but potato blight and tomato blight are the same, you know, they're the same thing. There's brown patches. They generally start on the outsides of the leaves. So I see a lot of people with a little bit of yellowing and a few brown spots on their leaves thinking that they've got blight. Now I can't 100% say because it isn't 100% easy to tell whether you've definitely got it or not, but generally speaking, if you've got blight, there will be brown patches, and they will more often start on the outsides of the leaves, and they are quite big. If you turn the leaf over, if it had it, you'd have almost like a little bit of like mold, a white mould ring around it. So again, it's quite distinctive. So if you've got slightly yellow in the leaves, or even just like a mottled looking colour on the leaves, it's probably not blight. Blight is very, very distinctive, very dark brown, almost black in cases, and when it's spread really badly, it's on the stems, and you'll get patches on the stems, and if it's got onto the stems, it's probably gone too far, if I'm honest. So if you do see a few leaves that have got it, I mean, just take them off if you're in any doubt, but don't just strip the plant unnecessarily. So that's a few things there. And obviously the worst thing that happens is when it's really bad, it goes to the fruit and the fruit rots. And that's another thing as well. I see a lot of blossom end rot is a common mistake. People see blossom end rot, where you just get the base of the tomato that is sunk. This is what the tomato looks like. Blossom end rot is where just the base of the tomato is sunken in and a bit brown. Potato blight is when the fruit itself generally goes brown. So yeah, it's actually rotting is the best way you can describe it. The fruit actually looks like it's rotting. The leaves, it's a similar thing. They're actually rotting, which obviously isn't very nice at all. So that's identification. So there are two types of blight. There is the earlier blight that you get in the summer, and there is the late blight. Now, typically speaking, the earlier blight is the worst one to get because the fruits don't really even get a chance to form, and if they do, if you get it, it's probably going to rot your fruit. The late blight. If I'm honest with you, most of us get it towards the end of the season if we leave our tomatoes out long enough, and I don't really concern myself with that. I will often get, because I will leave my tomatoes out for as long as I possibly can, because I like to ripen mine up on the plants, I will generally get a little bit of blight right towards the end of the season, and it doesn't affect the fruit that much, and it doesn't bother me as much, but it's the earlier blight that we are really concerning ourselves with. If you're finding that you're getting a lot of blight, there are a couple of varieties, Crimson Crush and Mountain Magic, are quite resistant to blight. None of them are completely 100% not going to get it, but they are a little bit more resistant, so that's something you can do. If I thought one of my tomatoes had blight, now this is the all important thing, if I thought one of them had it, if I could only just see the odd leaf, I would take off the branch that I thought had it. That would be my first port of call. If it was really bad and I had other tomatoes around it and I didn't want to affect it, I might make the decision to pull the whole plant up to save the rest, if that makes sense. Again, it's a decision you have to make for yourself if you think you've got blight. That's why I say make sure you identify it properly, because the last thing you want to do is rip up a plant unnecessarily if there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. The other thing you can do is there are some sprays you can get out there. Captain's Jack does a spray, it's called a copper fungicide. I will put a link up on the screen and one in the description. Personally, I would only use something if I thought everyone around me was getting blight. So I generally try not to use pesticides or sprays or anything. It is an organic one actually, but I still try not to use anything because obviously it costs money. But if I knew a lot of my neighbours were getting it, it's another reason why I don't have my tomatoes up the allotment. I have them at home, because up the allotment, if you've got someone who's not looking after their plants properly and they're all overcrowded and they get blight, because it's spread by air, you're more likely to get it, whereas at home I've got a little bit more protection. So if, like I said, lots of my friends were getting blight and it seemed like it was imminent, that it was really very much in the area, then I would spray possibly. Again, that's a decision for you to make on what's right for your plants. Now, I do hope that's helped you identify blight, and it will help you have some fantastic tomatoes.